Herland Sister Resources Oral History Project, February 3rd, 2018. Filmed at the Women's Research Center and BGLTQ Plus Student Center at the University of Central Oklahoma. Interviewer Jake Crystal, interviewee Sally Blevins.
Okay, so can we start with you just telling us your name?
Sally Blevins.
Okay. And how long have you been a part of Herland?
I would say over 20 years. From the days when it was in the storefront to now when you guys have got the wonderful library. So I've been more active at one time than others, but yeah, I've got about 20 years under my belt.
How would you define your role within Herland?
I was a board member for several years, and I was the retreat mic for several years because I can project very well with my big mouth, and so I would get everyone around to come to the open mic or whatever, and I would get people. So I've done a little bit of everything. I've been a hamburger flipper and at the cookouts, and just done, I guess, everything you can do at Herland.
When and how was the group founded?
Herland was founded by, what is her name? Now I'm drawing a blank. There were 3 women that got together, I think 2 or 3 women that got together, and there was a woman that had this storefront, and it was a cool little place in the neighborhood, just, out of the way and didn't look like anything, and you'd go in and there'd be all these wonderful books and posters and records and golly, I hate it when my mind goes blank. And they started it, and so they started collecting treasures, because at the time when we came out, I was saying earlier that when I was in college is when I found out I was a lesbian. I realized I was a lesbian, and someone had called me a lesbian, and I didn't even know what that word meant. So I went to the library at school, and I'm sitting there going through the card file, going lesbian, 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 what does that mean? And then I've got a book that pulled it out and got a dictionary first and looked, and it was like, well, I guess that might be me. I don't know. Hadn't experienced anything, but it was very much something that you just didn't talk about. And Herland was a place where you could go and meet other people who were like-minded and like feeling, because you're going through high school and you have feelings for a girl, but you're not supposed to, so you date a boy and you're going, this doesn't feel right, and all that kind of bullshit, and you're going, oh my God, what am I doing? And but Herland was a nice place because you could go and actually be with other people who understood what you were feeling.
And if I could add to that, just a little follow-up. Did you live your entire life in Oklahoma?
Yes, my entire adult life. I was a kid in Kansas, but my parents moved to Oklahoma when I was in the 6th grade. And so from 6th grade so that would be what, like 12, 13, 12, I guess, till 58, I've been in Oklahoma. And it certainly has been a backward state. We still live in the 50s in some places, and that would be 1950, not 2050. And they, just being from a small town, you didn't have anybody you could talk to. And, when I came out to my mom, we cried because she thought it's the classic, Mom, I'm gay. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? Well, you didn't do anything wrong. This is just the way I am, and all that stuff. And it's like, what? So we cried. And I think probably about everybody's got that kind of a story where you come out to your mom. And I didn't ever, well, I did come out to my dad, but that was a totally another thing. But it just wasn't talked about anywhere, and in any kind of a circumstance. So Herland was a shining beacon in the middle of this dark desert highway, because it was like nothing.
What do you know about therapy sessions at the Herland House?
I didn't do anything with the therapy sessions, so I can't speak on them because I didn't do anything. I know when we first started, you know, you'd go in and there'd be people sitting around, and it was a kind of therapy. It wasn't an official therapy session, but you'd be sitting there talking to people that understood where you were coming from, and so it was very therapeutic to go in and talk with people, but I don't know when they started that.
Can you tell me about the social aspects and experiences of the bar, of the group, bars, etc.?
No, I don't know about bars, etc.
Like the bar scene.
The bar scene?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, isn't that what I mean? I was
Yeah.
like, this is a really weird question.
Yeah,
It's
I think
worded
we're
really
talking
weird.
about
Okay.
the difference between the bar scene versus Herland, or what it was like.
Back then, yeah, back in the beginning. Well, you would go out to the bar, and everybody was in hiding, so you know, you didn't, if you saw somebody you knew, you would very quietly go up and, are you gay? Well, yeah, I'm here, aren't I? Well, you know, I don't want to say anything till you admit it. And so you could go to the bars and be very still hidden. And when you went to Herland, you were still incognito, but you weren't hidden, because you were there and it was a group setting, and everybody, especially like on the retreats, you could go and one year we went to Hinton and the Red Rock Canyon, and my mother was the park, well, she wasn't the park ranger, but she was, because they had rangers that worked there, but she was the activities director. So she took, and she came down and gave a talk. She had a talk about there's the trail that goes where you can see where the Conestoga wagons went through the Red Rock, and there are things that she would talk about. So she came down and told the group at our camp about that, and then she took us on a walk. So I always tell my mom she led the first gay pride walk in Hinton, because it was all these lesbians following her around going, hey, that's cool, what's this, and that's cool. And there were a couple of people that were very active marijuana smokers, and marijuana grows wild down in Red Rock Canyon. And so my mom would go, well, there's some places down here where pot grows, and these women were going, where? And Mom's going, what? I'm going, Mom, just let that die. And so they were all looking about it, but it was very fun. And Herland, you would go and you would be able to drop all of your fakeades and your fake faces and be able to be who you were, whereas in the bar you still had to kind of carry a kind of a persona, because you didn't want to be too vulnerable. And you could be too vulnerable at Herland, but everybody was kind of there looking out for you and wanting to help you be able to be you.
Can you tell me any details about the structure of the organization of Herland?
The structure has always been Barbara started it, and then it went to a board which had a first sister, which would be like the president, second sister would be like vice president. Of course, we didn't use president and vice president because those were too masculine. And it's like, blech, nobody wants that. So you had first sister, second sister, third sister, and fourth sister. And you would rotate through. The board usually had like 10 to 12 women on the board, and then you'd have and of those 12, the 4 would be out of the 12. So sometimes we had more than that, depending on if there was a lot of people coming through Herland. Of course, the more people that came through Herland, the more we wanted people to be active. So we'd say, well, why don't you join the board? Hey, yeah, I can do that. And then you'd get on the board and they'd work you to death, and you'd be going, okay, I can't do this anymore. You guys are working me to death, because there would be so much stuff going on. Because in the heyday of Herland, there was something going on there all the time. And they'd have, I don't know if they still do it, but they had movie night where they would show lesbian movies, which was always fun, because I remember when the first lesbian movie that came out, that was to hit the main theaters came out, and all the women just knew that those actresses were lesbians. I'm going, they're actresses. That's what they do. They act like they're love another woman. They're not. And what is the name of that movie? Okay, well, see, my brain just freaks out and jumps ship, and then I'm left floating out in the ocean. But we had a lot of talks about that because it was showing actually in the movies at the real theaters, not just in Herland's. And that's when we used VHS tapes. You know, you had the tapes, and people are going, VHS tapes? What's a tape? And, you know, I mean, when you're old, everything is, you've done everything. And so, we would watch movies, and then they would go to movies that had women's themes like Carol, and, you know, they could do that now, but Carol was something that would be totally unheard of back in the early 80s because it just, you know, people didn't talk about AIDS, they didn't talk about lesbians, they didn't talk about gay people, they just didn't talk about anything. So during the AIDS crisis, which that was the beginning of the AIDS crisis, the women would be, we would be in there talking to the county or the state would have a conference or something on AIDS. The men who were positive, AIDS positive, you know, were full-blown AIDS, would show up and they'd go, I'm dying, and what are you doing? You don't care. And they'd be sitting up there going, you're right, faggot, we don't care. And then they would, the women, the guys would be escorted out because they'd get so emotional because it was their lives that they were talking about. And then the women would step up and go, okay, now you cannot just ignore this faction of the populace because we are tax-paying citizens and we work and we live, and you have to take care of them too. And so a lot of it was where the men would start it, you know, they would, but the women would kind of come in and tidy up and tuck in the corners because the guys were so, I mean, I understood, you know, it's like, this is killing you and you want something to be done, and they're sitting around going, well, we don't care. And it's very, extremely frustrating. And then, you know, to have that be your life and then be going, you're nothing, it's just more than some people can handle and more than some people should handle.
What does it mean to you to have a woman-only space?
Oh my God. In the beginning, that was so important. I don't know that I have the words that can say because you had to deal with men in the real world, and you had to wear this mask and pretend like, you know, and that was back before they had the Me Too and all that stuff. And so there were always jokes about whatever. And if you, like, my wife can pass for a straight girl. I don't really pass very well as a straight girl. I've always had, since I was 13, I've had short hair, and I rather have jeans and a shirt on than anything. And so it was like you could go in there and be yourself, and if you wanted to wear tacky jeans and a baggy shirt, you didn't get called on it. And it's funny, my mother still will try, I'm 58, and my mother still tries to put me in girls' clothes sometimes. She'll order, you know, a vest, and it's a very nice vest, but it'll still be, you know, it's got the girl, like, no pockets and no, I'm going, okay, Mom, thanks. And, you know, I'm sure till the day she dies, she's going to be trying to make me a girl, but she's very accepting of me, don't get me wrong. She's very accepting, and she loves Georgie, and my whole family is very accepting of me, and Georgie's family is accepting of her. But in the beginning, it was like to have a space where you could go in and not have to put on all of those facets of all the bullshit was very nice, even beyond nice. But it was invaluable.
How significant was the woman-only space within Herland as a
it was very, in the beginning again, it was very valuable because there just wasn't, I mean, the bars in Herland were about the only place you could go. There was softball. Now, a lot of women played softball, so you didn't expect the players on softball teams to be lesbians, but you found out that a lot of them were. You know, so you would go play softball and then it'd be like, well, hey, then you'd be out at the bar and you'd see somebody that you played softball with and be like, well, hey, I was kind of wondering, but I didn't want to say anything, and yeah, okay. And so it, for Herland, because they had the retreat, but that was also another woman's space, because at the, you know, they would ask that the male rangers not come into the camp, and they would ask that, you know, that the first sister would take care of, or whoever was in charge of the camp would take care of paying for the camp at the office where the men were, and we'd say, can you please not come in here? And usually they were very cooperative because, I mean, we're paying them money, you know, it's like, if you don't want our guys in there, we won't go. And so wherever Herland went, Herland made it a woman's only space if they could. And so that was very, very good, because, you know, you could go other places and still be yourself.
Well, first of all, these are awesome answers. Thank you. Somebody's dropping something off to me, so I'm not walking away to be
Okay.
rude. I'm just going to go
Okay.
get that. And,
Okay.
it's a lot.
Did you happen to find out what the name of that movie was?
Yeah, it's
Desert Hearts.
Yeah.
Desert
Yeah,
Hearts.
What other issues about sexuality and expression have emerged within the group?
Well, when, like I said, when Herland started, it was, you know, the men who were dealing with AIDS, and we would have lessons on how to have safe sex for women, because the women, it was one of the things that the straight community would go, well, you queers have got AIDS, and we'd go, well, actually lesbians are the least, have the least amount of AIDS in our populace as anybody, because it's in more heterosexual women and men than it is in the lesbian population. And so we would have the little split the condom up the middle and make a dental dam out of it, or get a dental dam, and there you go. And we'd teach about that. And but there were lots of books that you could, if you were, you know, although, yeah, if you were questioning what you could do, there were books that would help. And Herland had a bunch of really good books, which you've got the library here, and that's awesome. But, you know, it was like people would talk, and you'd go, really? No, yeah. And so, but it was very much you could go and get real answers and not get the phony stuff that was out in the real world, you know. So it was good.
Do you want to share some of your best memories from any of the retreats you went to?
Oh, sure. Oh my gosh. Well, Margaret Cox, who I know you've interviewed too, she used to be our local straight girl, because she came in and she was straight, she'd been married, had a child, and that was before lesbian couples had children, really, because, you know, back then you were so hidden, you didn't, if you had a kid, you would probably have your child taken away from you if it was found out that you were lesbian, because the husband would come in and say, look at her, she's a deviant and she can't raise my child, and blah, blah, blah. So there were a lot of women that were fighting to keep their children in the 90s, because they had, you know, they'd been forced to marry, or not forced to marry, but they felt like they were forced to marry. And they would marry and have kids, and then they'd go, well, that's not me. And then they would determine or realize who they really were. And so Herland had a fund set up to help women get their, or keep their kids. They did that in the 90s and early 2000s. And because so many women were having their children taken away from them. And I'm sorry, what was the question again? My mind just totally
You're okay.
went.
Best memories of the retreat that you want to share.
Oh yeah, and so Margaret was our one straight girl, and then she met a woman, and then it was like, Margaret, you've been hiding this all this time, and here we thought you were the straight girl, and she'd go, oh, you guys, leave me alone, leave me alone, and but she turned out to be a really good lesbian, so we've kept her. But one year we were at the Boiling Springs, I think. And anyway, it had a big lake, and we were out, and there were about 5 or 6 of us out swimming, and we'd gone skinny dipping because it was nice, warm. It was the fall retreat, and it was really warm, and so we were out there, and this boat was out on the edge. It was out way in the middle of the lake, and we were over on the edge by the shore. And there was a big rock, and so a couple of the women were laying up on the rock, sunning, and we were swimming, and this boat kind of tools by. And I noticed that there's 2 guys on there, and I'm going, well, just go away. And so then we all started waving at them. And at that, I haven't shaved my underarm for about 30 years. So I used to have a really nice big muff under my arm. And so we're swimming and playing around. And so they're passing us, and I'm jumping up and waving real big and waving, and they're going, wait a minute, there are boobs and hair. What is that over there? Because it's like it was just not the way it was supposed to be, you know. And these guys they'd trill a little closer this way, and we were going, go away, just get out of here. We don't want anything to do with you. And they would go, and then finally I guess they got enough looking, and they went on. But that was really fun because it was like they were going, what the hell is going on over there? Because there's these 6 or 7 women out swimming naked in a public lake, and they're going, you're not supposed to do that, you know. Well, you need to go on and do your fishing somewhere else. So that was really fun. And we would have entertainment come in for the retreat because we actually had enough people come to the retreat that we had some money that we could pay for someone of name to be there. And we've had the Therapy Sisters several times, and Nancy Scott is from Austin also, and she came a couple of times. And if you're not familiar with the Therapy Sisters or Nancy Scott, you really need to look into them because they have been leaders in the lesbian music world for 20, 30 years too. They've done a lot. And we had, there's a comedian by the name of Williams, Margaret Williams maybe. She's an African-American comedian who is very, very funny. And she came to our retreat. We were able to get her to come to the retreat one time. And there was this stupid, oaky girl that was one of the bad ones. It's like, you know, you get these group of women and you got all these good women, and there's always the one that stands out being the, how'd you get in here? And she's going, she was sitting there, and this stupid woman goes, because she was a woman, but she goes, I've never made it with a black woman. Would you like to? And I'm going, would you shut the fuck up? And people are going, what are you doing? And Ms. Williams is going, I'm just going to ignore that and go on with my thing. But it was like, I said, you need to get out of here. You know, it was embarrassing to all of us. It's kind of like Donald Trump is today. He's embarrassing, and you just want to go. So, but she did that, and I was going, man, Ms. Williams will never come to Oklahoma again, probably ever, because this stupid woman opened her mouth. But the retreats were always a lot of fun, and we'd have open mic, and so people would get up and sing or read poetry, and Judith Rycroft wrote some wonderful poetry, and she would get up and always go through 3 or 4 poems, and everybody'd be going, okay, Judith, that's enough, because you've got us all excited now, and we're having to go eat dinner, so stop. And so she wrote really good romantic poetry. But the retreats were great because, like I said, you took Herland to someplace else, but it was still a woman's space, and we didn't allow boys after the age of 10, I think. So, you know, you could have little boys, but that wasn't until later in the year because, like I said, in the beginning, women didn't have kids because the husbands would try to take them away from them. So it was in the 2000s is when it started having kids, little girls and little boys.
Do you know anything of Herland's role in the women's prison outreach at all?
I know that they did a lot of stuff in the women's prisons, trying to get like education in there and like books and that kind of thing in. But I was never involved with that, so I don't know a lot about it.
What do you think Herland's biggest challenges have been?
Money, like any nonprofit organization, money has been a big challenge for Herland because when they bought everybody was all gung-ho about buying the building. And it's like, the building we're going to have insurance and you have to have this and that and, keep the lights on and all that stuff. And when they bought the building, I believe someone passed and let them some money. And so we bought the building, and now the building is it's a big, do we want to keep it? Do we want to sell it? Because it's on a strip of land. The 39th Street strip is it's on the edge of maybe not so good. It's because the house has been broken into several times. They've stolen our air conditioner and our heater and anything they could get for money and stuff, and they've been in there. So we put bars on the windows, and it's still like, well, okay, maybe we should sell it, but we would never get the money back that we put into it. So but money has always been the greatest challenge for Herland, because when recently we've had some women have passed that have left some large amounts of money to Herland. And so it's what do we do with this money? Because we've got the building, which we need to keep up. If we're going to have it, you can't have it leaking and all that kind of stuff, especially when we did have the library still there. You didn't want it leaking on stuff. And so I think that probably Herland's challenge was having fresh blood and money. And that's the way of all nonprofit or volunteer organizations, is having new blood and money, because Herland is just like every other one, just, having a hard time with that.
Last question. What do you think the legacy of Herland is?
Oh, the legacy of Herland is, I would say, joy, because when you get into that woman's space and I came from a small town. Hinton my class graduated 26 people, and I think maybe 18 of us actually walked across the stage for the diplomas. And Georgie, when we first got together, she would talk about coming from a small town. Well, I came from a small town, blah, 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 blah. Well, where'd you come from? Enid. Enid is not a small town. Enid is a huge town. Enid had Tri-State, and Enid had all this. And I said, how many people graduated in your class, Georgie, your high school graduating class? 600 and something. And I'm saying, you want to know how many graduated from mine? 26. And I said, so let's look this over again. So I'm a small town, you're a big town girl, but still it didn't matter, because it still was a thing where lesbianism wasn't talked about, and it wasn't. So, I mean, I could kind of see her point in it, but it was like, honey, no, you come from a big town, I come from a little town. And it was the joy of being able to go someplace and be yourself. And Herland has always done that, whether it's moved here where you guys have set up this great space for women and people to come in and learn and share, and then joy and freedom, because you could be yourself there and just be natural and not have to do all that phony stuff that you did out in the real world. And the world has gotten better. I mean, I will agree, because we do have, Desert Hearts was the first movie that was ever out. And then there was Bound was one that had dealt with lesbians. And then there was the one about the Olympic runner who, that was a sidebar of it, that she was a lesbian and they killed her off. Used to be in the movies, if there was a lesbian, she always died a horrendous death because she either died of some terrible cancer that just ate her from the inside out, and she died moaning and groaning, or she was killed by somebody, like in the one about the transgender gentleman who they killed in
Boys Don't Cry.
Yeah, Boys Don't Cry. And so it was always something terrible that happened. And so the movies have come a long way, so it's good to see that movies have come, but there's still a long way that they can go, because, you know, I mean, there's yet to be a movie that just says, oh, hi, I'm a lesbian, I live in a house, I have 5 dogs, I have a wife, she goes to work, I go to work. We're kind of humdrum, you know, people, but it'll happen one of these days, but I think it's probably in Oklahoma a long, long way away still. But, you know, everything starts on the coasts and then moves in. And since we're the very center of our country, we get everything the last. It's like, so we'll wait around. We're very patient people. Well, not really, but we'll pretend we're patient and wait till it gets here. But yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add that you want archived on the documentary at all? Anything that we missed?
Just that Herland was a godsend when I was younger, and I didn't find out that I was a lesbian until I was 23. So I was quite old when I found out, and there were all these women who were saying, oh man, you know, I had my first experience in high school, and I'm going, man, I didn't even know what it meant, you know. And so Herland was just such a godsend that I don't know where I'd be if it weren't for Herland and the women there, because the women that made up Herland were the guts and the glory. And Herland was just the building, but it's not just a building, because we had the picnics there and we had all the stuff. And Herland, the young people today that don't know about what Herland did, I'm glad that you're making this documentary, because Herland was so very important to the women who've come before. It's just like feminists. The young women today that say, well, I'm not a feminist. Well, you need to be thanking a feminist, because some woman put her neck on the line and said, I'm not going to go get your goddamn coffee. I'm going to sit here and do my work, and I'll take your shorthand, but I'm not getting you coffee, and all that things that have gotten women where they are today. And I think if it weren't for Herland, we would still be in the dark ages. So I really appreciate you guys doing this. Thank you.